Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Friends, before going into the details of the war, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel and turn on the notification bell. Please support by subscribing and turning on the notification bell. We are a strong community. Russia's war in Ukraine. How a conscientious objector escaped the frontline. This is the story of Kirill Berezin, who was mobilized, got as far as the Ukraine border, slept on the ground, refused to carry a rifle, and fled back to St. Petersburg after a commander threatened him with violence. Investigation into his complaint means he can stay home for now and fight for his right to serve without arms. Will that right be upheld in the current circumstances is unclear. On October 25, conscript Kirill Berezin hailed a taxi by a shop in a frontline village near Belgorod, and arranged for the driver to take him to Petersburg. My goal wasn't to evade military service. I was forced to leave the camp temporarily under difficult circumstances. I knew my request to transfer to the alternative civilian service wouldn't be looked at, and I feared for my life due to the illegal actions of Lieutenant Colonel Smerdov. This is Berezin's statement from a report by the military investigator in Petersburg, where the conscript turned himself in. The BBC Russian tells the story of the 27-year-old cabinetmaker from Petersburg who refused to kill people in the war, and escaped from the Unit 02511 military camp by the village of Koklovo, near Belgorod in southwestern Russia. They shut the door and wouldn't let me out. On September 24, Berezin found his call-up papers under his door. He didn't sign the document as the law requires, but he wasn't going to avoid the service either. He went to the recruitment office and asked to be sent into the Alternative Civilian Service, or the AGS, as it is abbreviated in Russian. You don't need a gun in your hands to serve the motherland, and you don't have to be in a special operation zone, says Kirill Berezin. Berezin had already served in the army. During his military service he'd fired a gun, but even then he couldn't imagine using it to kill anyone. The gun is a bringer of destruction. You can't create anything with it. He wanted to discuss this at the recruitment office. But nobody would listen. As soon as Kirill entered the building, he was met by the police, who locked the door behind him and wouldn't let him out. Before I could open my mouth, they took away my passport and military ID. And that was that. They put Kirill on a bus and sent him to a military unit in Kamenka, near Vyborg, returning the documents after the new recruits arrived to the unit. From the start there was talk of deaths and severe casualties like severed limbs. Positive side was discussed as well. The new arrivals were told how much money is promised to those who manage to destroy enemy equipment. Unit 02511 in Kamenka is home to the 138th Motorized Rifle Brigade. It used to have a sketchy reputation. Suicides and runaway soldiers were reported. In February 2022, the brigade was sent to fight in Ukraine. At the end of March it suffered heavy losses at the village of Malaya Rohan, near Kharkiv. Ukrainian news reported the destruction of their formation, publishing photographs of seized equipment and command documents. These are date-stamped, and suggest that Smerdov signed them on February 23, 2022. A press release from the Ukrainian intelligence service also claimed that the brigade were using topographic maps of the Kharkiv region from 1969, which showed none of the residential buildings built later on. In May, the prosecutor's office of Ukraine named Sergei Maximov, commander of the 138th Brigade, as a suspect for ordering the shelling of residential areas and civilian facilities. The Russian Ministry of Defense made no comment on this accusation. However, in June the news site, Sever Really, designated as a foreign agent in Russia, reported that at the funeral service for one of the unit's soldiers, an officer, Lieutenant Vladimir Chebotaryov, said more than 300 troops were cut off from their own men, surrounded and crushed. This was also confirmed by relatives of dead, captured, and missing Russian soldiers. In a comment posted on social media, the mother of one of the dead soldiers singled out Chief of Staff at the 138th Brigade, Lieutenant Colonel Anatoly Smerdov, as the one who'd sent his charges into certain death, and then left them in Malaya Rohan. US asks banks to keep some ties with Russia. Media reports the companies include Russian gas giant Gazprom and fertilizer producers Uralkali PJSC and Foss Agro PJSC, the Bloomberg news agency reported on November 7, with reference to people familiar with the situation. It noted behind the scenes, the U.S. Treasury and State Departments have urged banking giants including J.P. Morgan and Citigroup to keep doing business with certain strategic Russian firms. Representatives for Citigroup and J.P. Morgan declined to comment, Bloomberg said. A U.S. Treasury Department spokesperson said the department has issued guidance to the banking industry to make sure that activities connected to humanitarian aid, energy and agriculture are authorized. U.S. banks have been cautious, subjecting most business involving even non-sanctioned Russian clients to a complex and lengthy review process. That has driven the administration to encourage lenders to continue banking certain Russian companies as part of their efforts to avoid mass starvation across the planet. Food security for the world critically relies on these authorized transactions to continue, said Ambassador Jim O'Brien, head of the State Department's Office of Sanctions Coordination. We continue to clarify and also to reassure banks and others involved in agricultural trade that they are not part of the sanctions regime. Ukraine latest. Zelensky open only to genuine talks with Russia. The Russian invasion of Ukraine that began on February 24 continues, with casualties rising on both sides. Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced Russia's annexation of 4 partially occupied Ukrainian regions following referendums that Western nations called a sham. Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces are mounting a strong counteroffensive against Russian troops, reclaiming territory lost when Moscow launched its invasion. Ukraine has managed to withstand the Russian onslaught with the help of Western military aid, but President Volodymyr Zelensky regularly calls on the world to do more. For all our coverage, visit our Ukraine war page. Note: Nikkei Asia decided on March 5 to suspend its reporting from Russia until further information becomes available regarding the scope of the revised criminal code. Entries include material from wire services and other sources. Here are the latest developments. Tuesday, November 8, Tokyo time, 6:30 p.m. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he is open to talks with Russia, but only genuine negotiations that will restore Ukraine's borders, grant it compensation for Russian attacks and punish those responsible for war crimes. The remarks, made overnight, came days after a Washington Post report said that Washington wanted Kyiv to signal its willingness to talk, concerned that by appearing too intransigent Kyiv might harm its case for international support. Speaking before he was due to address world leaders at a global climate summit on Tuesday, Zelensky said, "Anyone who is serious about the climate agenda should also be serious about the need to immediately stop Russian aggression, restore our territorial integrity, and force Russia into genuine peace negotiations." 4 p.m. Russia and the United States are discussing holding talks on strategic nuclear weapons for the first time since Moscow sent troops into Ukraine, Russian newspaper Kommersant reports, citing 4 sources familiar with the discussions. Talks between the two sides on strategic stability have been frozen since Russia began its military campaign in Ukraine on February 24, even as the New START treaty on nuclear arms reduction remains in effect. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to my channel. See you in the next video.